We may be it. No. Hi, everyone. We're going to get started in just a few seconds. So thank you for joining.
Good morning. Happy Earth Day, everyone. We'll get started a little bit. As you can see, we're a bit corny today. We got all green grass backgrounds to celebrate Earth Day. We figured that'd be kind of a fun way to do it. But let's, yeah, like Caroline said, let's wait a couple minutes and then we'll get started, or a minute maybe.
All right. I think we have everybody that was in the weight room has joined already. So as Henrik said, thank you for joining us today on Earth Day. It's a very relevant day for the topic we'll be exploring. We'll be talking about sustainable products and how they can benefit your business and how you can start your journey towards creating those products. So we have an expert panelist of individuals that have an interest in the space, have worked with products in the space on a day-to-day basis. So starting with Henrik Johansson, he's currently the co-founder and CEO of Gemba, a product development platform and marketplace. He's also the executive producer of Final Product, a reality TV show incubated at Gemba. Henrik's new book, which is entirely about this topic, will be released later this year for Transparency, the Era of Customers with X-Ray Vision. So happy to learn more about that. We also have as well Gemba's head of design, Neil Macqueen, who's a world-leading industrial designer with 13 years of experience and 78 patents. And last but not least, Gemba's head of supply chain, Benjamin Hopwood, who's a global leader in supply chain management. And he's leading teams in China, Mexico, India, Vietnam, and Thailand, all regions with sustainability programs. So I will go ahead and turn it over to this illustrious panel. I think Henrik, you're on mute.
Figure out how to do it. There you go. Thank you, Caroline, for that nice introduction. Could you go to the next slide, please? Or maybe I'm controlling it. Wonderful. Well, there's our pictures. So now you know how we look with green backgrounds and without green backgrounds. Super excited to be here today with Neil and Benjamin and talk about this important and exciting topic. So here's the agenda. Why develop sustainable products? You know, we all know it's good for the planet. It's what you're supposed to do, right? But I think what you'll see today is that there's a really strong business reason for developing sustainable product too. And that will cover in the immediate benefits from sustainable products. So it's not just about being a do-gooder, but it's also about a really great way to connect with your customers and find new customers. So then instead of just talking high level, we're going to dig in. We want this to be an actionable webinar for you, so you can take something away and go do it immediately and help your business. So we're going to share 5 strategies to get started. And that's it. Should be fun, interactive. And Benjamin and Neil are 2 of the most knowledgeable people around when it comes to this topic. So should be exciting. So first, real quick, why sustainable products are important. You know, if you're old like me, you may not care that much about it, but I think that the huge trend that you're seeing out there in the world is that the millennials, you know, those are people that are sort of 25 to 40 years old, and then the next generation, Gen Z, that are, you know, people from I think 12 to 25. There's been numerous consumer surveys out there. And this generation really do care about the brands that they purchase from. They really see that things they buy is part of an extension of them, right? They see that what they buy says something about who they are. So they are not going to buy product from a company that they think have a, you know, sweatshop in you know, overseas somewhere. They're not going to buy products from a company that they think are supporting suspect you know, business practices. They want to buy products from a company that is doing the right thing, they're taking a stand for what's right in the world, and creating products that are good for the planet. So you've seen a little bit of it happen. There's been a lot of talk about it, but I think, or I'm convinced that there's this landslide, this tidal wave of a shift in purchasing. And if you look at the purchasing power, the millennials and the Gen Z will, over the next 5 years, be by far the biggest, have the most purchasing power in the world. So again, it's not just about doing good, it's about targeting and appealing to the biggest groups of buyers in the world, as that's changing. Amazon recognizes this. So whether you're selling Amazon or not, Amazon is thinking about sustainability. It's still, I think it's only, it sounds like a lot, 23,000 products are on Amazon that have some kind of a certification. They call it their climate pledge. There are actually 13 different ways to get that badge. We're showing some of them down here. It's going to be compact by design, which is more about packaging and taking less space, to other fair trade, which is one set of certifications, cradle, where you recycle things. So we're not going to go through all these today, but I highly encourage you to take a look at Amazon's climate page. There's about 23,000 products, but that's less than 0.1% of all the products that are on Amazon. So there's still a great way to differentiate yourself and stand out on Amazon is by getting one of these certifications. So we'll get into that more today about how you can potentially get some of those. And we don't have any, Amazon doesn't publish any data on this yet, but several of the marketing partners in our network are saying that if you have one of these badges, you can list higher. So it's a way to get a higher ranking on Amazon without spending a bunch of advertising dollars. All right. So this will get into more detail. I mentioned it, that the younger generations are definitely looking for this, but also all generations are looking for it. And so what is sustainable? Well, it's going to be a number of different things, right? I think first, let's be honest, the most sustainable thing to do is not to create a new product or not increase purchasing of more stuff that goes into the world. But I think we all know that no matter how good our intentions are not going to stop consumption. People are still going to buy things. People are still going to need things to do what they do in life. And so with that fact, right, now we have an opportunity to create a better alternative, create a more sustainable product to replace that product that is not sustainable today. So that can be anything from goods made from fresh organic ingredients. It can be that it's more environmentally friendly, the production process. You can also do things that are more social responsibility. It may be that how things are made, who the people are making it. I'm wearing a bracelet from Ubuntu. This is made by women that have handicapped children in Kenya. So that's part of their brand. It's probably not the cheapest way to make a beaded brand, but it has a purpose behind it. Then, of course, I mentioned packaging, environmentally friendly packaging, not just that is recyclable, but actually, if you make packaging smaller, it takes less space. It's easier to ship. It takes less space on the shelf. And then finally, once you create one of these, you don't have to do all of them, but as you start defining your brand that's as a sustainable, as a responsible brand, then you can really drive that in your advertising, and it can drive significant loyalty and appreciation from your existing and new customer base. So that's a little bit of the high level. Before I hand it over to Neil and Benjamin, it's not a magic bullet, right? It takes some effort for sure. And we'll talk about that today. Like there's different strategies you want to make. Like if you have an existing product line and you want to make it more sustainable, that's great. And there's certain strategies, it's pretty easy to do, focus on packaging and other things like that. Almost the easiest thing is like if you're starting with a new product or you're creating a new brand, to design sustainability into the brand, into the product from day one, because then it doesn't require any, re-engineering or changing it. So as with any business, any product, you always have to think about desirability, feasibility, viability, and we'll get into all these factors as we go through the 5 strategies to create more sustainable products. So super excited about introducing you to Benjamin Hopwood, and he's going to cover strategy number 1, which is, those are the 5 strategies. Benjamin, you want to talk us through this?
Certainly. So as a team, when we think about what Gemba is really passionate about is the thought process around how do you really break down the different areas that you want to begin touching on, such that you can have a successful product development journey, such that this is a product that, as mentioned, is desirable, it is viable. In what goes on. And so some of the high level areas that Neil and I are going to be talking about, it's going to be around extracting and processing, around what does that look like in the manufacturing process? How can you be more responsible in this area? A third one in the area of packaging, which I'm excited to talk about. Like there's certain areas that I think are very low lift, but high impact. Also, what does this look like in terms of reimagining, in terms of how do you reduce energy and installation and long-term maintenance on your product? Then the final one is this end of life in terms of what does it look like when you're recycling? So again, these are 5 high-level items, but that at Gemba, we really try and think through from your standpoint. Some of you are going to be coming and saying, hey, I really want to radically rethink the way this is done. And what are some strategies to get into that? We're not going to be in all of those today. But then the other one is it's like, what is going to be low lift, high impact types of areas to where we can go ahead and move this just the next step. So in the first one that we'll talk about today, on the extraction and processing of material, I think for many of us, there is a sense, a growing sense. For some of us, it's just like full-blown realization that our biosystems are being severely impacted by the footprint of humans on the world. I think that there's been some, you still end up finding pockets of groups that say, it's fine. But that for all of us, especially in the consumer product area, also in the industrial product area, there are huge opportunities that are out there to find materials that we can take out of ecosystems that either by avoiding their use, and we've seen a lot of policy that's been developed in multiple different organizations and sales and retail side by saying, we're no longer going to use PVC in our products. If your product has PVC, I'm sorry, we're just not going to sell it. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. But then also looking and saying, how can we actually take materials that have been damaging an ecosystem and begin to use them in a new way? And so have my resources been sourced responsibly? Are there byproducts out of this? Again, it's a initial way to think about your product and to begin rethinking what would this potentially look like. One of our call to actions today on our next slide is going to be, if you're involved in the area of plastics. Gemba has a partner that we work with. Their name is OceanWorks. If you've not heard of them, jump on their website today. They're an amazing group. This is a group that's looking at traceability around plastics that were either on the way to the ocean or near shore in the ocean or even very deep in the ocean. And they've set up a traceability system such that you can look at by lot where the plastic was created and then getting that into production. But as an example, if you could rethink your product in a way that could use OceanWorks plastic, this will allow you to reach that recycled 100 potentially. You can also find that you may not be able to do a fully recycled product. This is quite important on the production or on the product design process, is determining what's necessary. You may need to have a certain amount of virgin plastic in it. For some of you that are online, you would say, that's not us, we need to go full. And then others might say, hey, if I could get to 60 or 70% recycled product or plastic in my product, that would be a significant step forward. And Amazon has ways of badging for that. But this also allows you to have traceability. Imagine your client goes, they see the badge, there's a QR code on it, they scan the QR code, and then boom, this was pulled out of the ocean just outside of Europe or boom, this was pulled out of the ocean right outside of Indonesia. The client can see that you care about it, that you've set up systems, and then there's that magical moment for the client of saying, you know what, if there's 2 products on the shelf, I'm going to go for this product because they ended up going the extra mile. Once you have the system set up, there's no additional cost to it, but you do have to do a little bit of legwork at the beginning. They have a great deal of options that are out there. And ultimately, for you, as you think about this, part of what you'll need to do is you'll need to work with your manufacturers to determine whether they're going to be able to use the recycled product. This can be challenging because certain groups are afraid of putting this into their machines, because ultimately there may be additional problems if it's not virgin. So you need to make sure that your supply chain is set up in the right way. But this is a real step to actively remove plastics that are either on the way or are already in the ocean. So our second strategy as we go into this looks at material and product manufacturing. What are we talking about here? Really, this is looking at what were the inputs that went into the product in order to get it to your Amazon box or your Shopify box, wherever it's coming from. How much energy input went into it, and what were the byproducts that were coming out of this? Can you leverage replaceable materials? And are there natural materials that are involved? Our call to action on this one is as an example. We've been seeing a growing movement around vegan leather. That's not to say that traditional leather is bad. However, that there are some real value propositions around leather that's created from a plant-based materials. Now, that said, you have to be really careful about this, right? Because as Henrik said, there's no magic bullets. But as an example of a way to think through this, down in our some of our North American colleagues and groups that are down in Mexico and then into Central and South America, we're seeing new product materials come out. One of them is an example, a cactus-based leather. So that what they're doing and what they're saying is, we can grow cactuses in very arid climates that normally would not sustain normal agriculture. This is essentially land that would not have been used well. It's good on the water side of the system. And then you can actually process this into very, very significant, into good leather products or into vegan leather products. Now, there's a lot of vegan leather that's out there, whether you're talking about mango wood, you're talking about other areas. I've seen pineapple plant leather on this side of it. There's a lot that's out there that you can begin thinking about and saying, how could we reach our organic 100 or blended batch here that again will bring up the overall organic portion, certainly on the plant side, and then allows you to get into that vegan branding and really into the niche of saying, hey, we rethought our products, whether that's in your pet products, maybe it's using leather, maybe that's in your bag products, maybe it's in a different area. But again, it allows a client to say, if I have the choice between 2, I choose this one because it fits with my values. And then in addition to that, you can also look to see, like, has this really reduced the number of inputs as well as chemical byproducts? This is an important conversation to have with any material that you're using to make sure that it's meeting all of those criteria that you as a brand want to hit.
Yeah, that's
Our
awesome.
third one.
Benjamin.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying in my prior company, we sold pet folios and other office products, and there was one company that made one made out of apples, right? And the experience when people received them was completely different, and smell it, and you can actually smell the apples. And I bring this up just because this. You're put in a different category that's also less price sensitive. Like if you're selling a reusable shopping bag, like in the prior example, or this kind of bag, how do you stand out from all the other listings on whatever marketplace you're selling on, right? There's 100 of those. If you're the first or the only product in that category that uses vegan leather or recyclable products, you have an opportunity to stand out significantly from everybody else, and potentially charge a much higher price for it. Because this is a conscious consumer. This is a consumer that want to do good in the world, and they're often willing to pay a slightly higher price for that too. So sorry to interrupt, Benjamin. Keep going.
Absolutely. No, I mean, it's totally true in terms of with it takes time to reimagine your products in this way. You need to set up your supply chain in the right way, but the payoffs we've seen have been significant for the brands that we've worked with. So the third area for us as we go into it, before I transition over to Neil's side, is reimagining what does packaging and transportation look like for your products. We're going to go into the boring part of our process, but oftentimes, and again, I'm a little bit biased on this side, but doing the right thing also has significant impacts to your bottom line. Before I get started on this, okay, I think all of us are aware, at least here in North America, we just were informed that Amazon it's going to be implementing a 5% surcharge on fuel and for inflation. It's a temporary thing. Amazon, please make this temporary, right? I hope it is, but I fear that it's not. As we go into this next period, especially as potentially being in a high inflation environment, this is going to require organizations to get serious now about making sure that your products are organized in a way that you have advantages wherever you can find them. I will just go ahead and preface this area by saying this is one of the highest impact, lowest cost areas that I think that you could action on. Is in the area of packaging and transportation. How can you ship for less? How do you have less shelving fees? How do you pay less gas, right? And all of these things, and have ultimately a lower fulfillment cost in what's going on, and potentially a lower packaging cost. Okay. Ultimately, one of the easiest ways, most of the time people are thinking immediately about the product itself and they forget about the packaging. But as an example, if you can go ahead and reduce the size of your packaging, now that may be in the box that it's shipped in, it may be in the plastic packaging that goes around the product. If you have creams or ointments or lotions or all of these types of things, you can think of the packaging. Amazon has set up their compact by design. There's very specific requirements for this, but organizations can quickly look at your product and determine whether there's opportunities here. You can use different methodologies, whether you're talking about doing thinner plastics or recycled cardboard, or just reducing the amount of cardboard that's going into it that would allow you to reach this opportunity where you end up hitting, again, less cost to potentially make the packaging. Two, that you would end up hitting the less cost in terms of with the volumetric weight that's being shipped. Amazon, as an example, is now moving to volumetric weights on this side of it. Like, you need to be prepared for this. You need to be thinking about this, because this will lower your bottom line, will make you more competitive in an environment that may be very challenging as we go into the next couple quarters. And then ultimately, then you can also start to put value propositions around your packaging and talking about this, hit that higher organic rating and reduce your logistics costs. For me, it's a boring area. Okay, like, hey, let's talk about your pallet design. Let's talk about how you've organized your products on your pallet. But you know what? That may sound boring, but if I came into it and I said, hey, let's reduce let's increase your margin by 3%. Let's do that. Okay, maybe that doesn't sound good. Let's increase the amount of money in your pocket by $20,000. Okay, maybe we'll start talking at this point. Don't let the boring portion of this stop you from making the right decisions now before other people are doing, and then at the same time make a significant impact on the environment and with what's going on. So again, I'll go ahead and wrap up here. I'm going to transition over to Neil, but this is a great area.
Yeah, beautiful, and it's not boring to make more money. I think that's a great point. And before I hand over to Neil, also intersection between packaging and product design, and maybe Neil will talk more about this, but we had customers too that, particularly if you're making large products like a barn door or, something that's really expensive to ship, they can be very simple product redesign approaches. That what if you could just make that in 2 pieces instead of shipping it in 1 piece? Now suddenly the packaging is half of what it was before. The shipping cost could be half. The storage cost could be half. So sometimes there are ways to redesign with packaging in mind that can have a significant impact on your product costing and profitability. So with that said, handing over to the brilliant Neil. Thank you so much, Benjamin.
Hi, hello everyone. So Neil Macqueen, head of design, and unsurprisingly, I have a bias being from a background of design towards our users. Everything we've described before is very much significant impact to sustainability, the planet, and your operations. Like, how do we now start to benefit your users? Like, how do we add functionality that also drives better sustainability for your products? And that's essentially the energy in use, as well as installation and maintenance. And how can we essentially drive for products to consume less power, but still provide better functionality? Like, if you could do that, why wouldn't you? So in terms of like how you might go about doing that, and I think this is, if I follow the trends of some of the world leading technology companies, they often set the trend of what is the future 10 years looking like for everybody else. So in terms of, if I use Dyson's purifiers as an example there, we all want clean air. We want clean air all the time. So like as a low hanging fruit, we might say, okay, instead of having your purifier on all the time, why not introduce some intelligent scheduling and the ability for low power modes, so that when the air is not dirty, your purifier isn't consuming power. It isn't costing you electricity bills. And there's an element of intelligence, like it improves the functionality of your product for your users, which is a win-win. I think it gives you better marketing leverage. You have differentiation from your competitors, and it's much better for the planet. I think if we then move that forwards again, one step further past the intelligent scheduling is, the introduction of something a bit more sophisticated, say sensors. Let's say that your product is not operating at all, but in this case is able to identify a pollution event and then reacts. This in the example applies to purifiers, but that applies to a whole, wide application of products in the home and around the home. If you look at connectivity, how can you drive better functionality for your product whilst also driving down power consumption? I think the last two examples of this also is just the introduction of enabling technologies to reduce emissions and power consumption. And again, forgive me for the high tech examples here, but in Dyson's most recent, I think it's the V11 cordless vacuum cleaner, it actually identifies the floor surface that your vacuum cleaner is cleaning and adjusts the power mode of the product in accordance. So two benefits right there. It's using less electricity, and it's also adapting its performance to provide you better cleaning on your floors. So again, that might not be directly you thinking, how does that apply to me? I'm not doing high-tech products, but I think what it is the synergy between, we can drive better performance in your product that also drives better sustainability and efficiency of energy use. Like, it is a win-win, a no-brainer. And I think the key thing there, it really gives you leverage power in diversifying and differentiating your product in the market. And it's an all-round winning combination. I think the last one there as well is designed so that assemblies can be disassembled, repaired, upgraded to extend life. A good example of that in the market, setting a trend, is Apple. You're able to add in and take apart, or I'll start with the add in, like on a new iMac, you're able to add in new RAM, open up the back of it yourself and extend the life of your product all the way through to, in some of their demo stores, taking your iPhone, and it will completely deassemble that product and send that back for recycling and reuse in the supply chain. I think with that sort of intentionality, and this does come at a higher cost because it requires development, it requires engineering of that. But I think the beauty of it is that really leverages, again, some marketing power. Like, we care about the integrity of our products, and that benefits both your clients, your marketing, and the consumer experience. People feel really good about that. So if I kind of move that forward into the last strategy, which is end of life, which are kind of pivoting from where we were, and reduce, reuse, recycle, disposal, like in order of priority. So if we jump straight to the next one, essentially is the best sustainability approach for end of life is just reduce. We talk about sustainable packaging. The best sustainable packaging is no packaging at all, but that also applies to product design. I think certainly in my experience across, various different companies, some people have route to market and speed as the priority. And they can actually be quite lazy with regards to the engineering of the product. Given a little bit more time and more of a lean engineering approach, again, a bit like what Benjamin mentioned, you can actually save yourself a lot of money by reducing wall thicknesses, adding in ribbing. That only, saves you raw materials. It drives better sustainability because you're using less of that material. And again, I think oftentimes with that added effort in terms of the engineering and attention you apply to your product, it actually oftentimes adds value to the product in terms of its usability for your clients versus reuse, repurposing packaging through quality material and desirability. My bad example here is a jam jar, but I was, last night thinking about how, what is a good example to bring alive for people is, and, my family loves jam, and, we have jam jars from years ago that we reuse. I've got my shed, like it's full of nails, or like my mother makes jam from jam jar she bought. Like it's a really easy example of it's a quality thing which you can then reapply and reimagine. I think there's a few good examples in the UK of as well of like premium high-end puddings which you can buy. I can't remember the brand right now. But instead of just being in a plastic container, they've opted for glass, again, in the same vein of a jar for jam. People, they are well known for people reusing them. You've seen them in people's homes. And I think it's that added value through something which is perceived as quality, like as mentioned at the beginning by Henrik, it differentiates you from your competition, and you can actually drive a higher margin on your product. And it has a sustainable edge, like it is a reusable part. Through to recycling. I think this one comes into quite a bit of like corporate responsibility to a degree with regards to design, like easy disassembly and reduction for secondary coatings. Like, again, in a few cases of high-end products, there might be the case that people, greenwashing. No one ever wants to greenwash a product. But if you're using recyclable or recycled products, in the case of that, if you add a secondary coating or a paint, like to be explicit, like if you spray paint that part with a nice glossy finish, that is incredibly hard to then remove, to actually then be able to recycle the product. So again, I think having that intentionality at the front end of design so that you can recycle and deassemble your product is massive in terms of its actual recyclability. Through to disposal, and in terms of new legislation coming through, particularly in Europe with the right to repair. Again, when you design your product, often in production, like the use of glues and adhesives, with a little bit more engineering again, and maybe replacing that glue with the screw boss so that the assembly can be deassembled and repaired by the owner, or preferably in my example, like Apple, by the manufacturer itself at end of life for repurposing and reuse, has a huge, huge impact and minimizes the need for landfill. I think that's the key thing. And again, I'd really stress that it's this intentionality in the multi-use and like reusable materials at the front end of your engineering endeavor, or maybe even you've identified a market category where you want to diversify and penetrate with some market sales. In the re-engineering of that product to add your feature set, there's some fairly low-hanging fruit of things you're like, okay, well, what could we do with the wall section? What could we do with, could we remove the spray painting of this and just have some interesting raw material colors? All of those things helps you not only improve your sustainability, but positively differentiate from competition in terms of your approach to design, which improves your clients' not only perception of your product, but in often cases, the user experience, which is what good design should always be about. So I'll hand it back to Henrik.
Brilliant, Neil, to use a word you often use. That's awesome. Thanks, Neil, Benjamin. You're both a wealth of knowledge to all the listeners out there. I hope we didn't overwhelm you. I know there's a lot of stuff, there's a lot of options. I think the key takeaway we hope you have is that you don't have to do it all. In fact, we highly recommend don't try to do it all, but do something. Take one step, and just that first step will allow you to start positioning your brand differently. They will allow you to differentiate from other products. So even if you just start with packaging, that's a great starting point, right? Or like I said, if you're thinking about launching a new product, design it in from the get-go. And again, it's not just doing good for the planet. It's not just doing the right thing. This does have a significant impact on your brand and your ability to differentiate, and can drive significantly improved sales, potentially improved margins. It can reduce a lot of what Benjamin talked about: storage costs, shipping costs, fulfillment costs, and potentially open you up to completely new channels. We're talking here about RIB, REI, but also think of the additional brand awareness that you can create. Suddenly, you're not just talking about selling a product, you're talking about selling a product's better for the planet. Suddenly the whole world is rooting for you. Press is more willing to write about you. Friends are more willing to post your social post because you're actually doing something that's good and right. That's also good for business. So don't be overwhelmed. This is part of what Gemba is here to do. We just launched our new sustainable offering. So if you're interested in getting help, you don't have to overthink it or try to sift through this. You can reach out to Gemba. We have sustainability experts on the team. And for relatively low cost, you can get started and just get an analysis. Look at your product, look at your catalog. Let's figure out together ways that you can move forward. So with that said, any questions I can answer, or Neil or Benjamin can help answer.
All right. So we have a few minutes to answer questions. Encourage anyone to put their questions in Q&A or chat. Also as well, if you have a certain product that you're interested in pursuing, maybe more sustainable options, if you want to put that in chat or QA as well, we can explore a few ideas while we're on the phone today. So I am going to go over to our Q&A. All right, so Jen is was wondering about sustainable Gemba suppliers. Is there criteria to be part of the supplier network?
Yeah, so Jen, thanks for being on the webinar today. The answer is that we absolutely do audit our vendor base. For us, like when we think about Gemba, we think about the Gemba circle. We want to have all of the different people that are the stakeholders that are involved in the ideation, in the manufacturing and the fulfillment portion of it in one place, so that we can have really good outcomes with that. And so for the manufacturers that are out there today, understanding for us and being able to communicate that to creators and to our expert network, who are they dealing with? And for many manufacturers, as you're probably aware, they end up having to go through significant amounts of certification. Now, there's internal programs that happen, and Gemba in our audit process captures some of those things, both from an ethical standpoint of making sure that the ethical standards are met, both from a local standpoint as well as from a global standpoint, but then also in the area of certification around the sustainability pieces. So in some of this, it may be areas where the material is being verified that it has no additional chemicals or other things. So like an example, this would be like Oecotex, the standard 100 that's out there. But that's just like one example out of many. Then you have all sorts of work that's gone into other standards, as well as the UN standards that the companies have. And so we really try to bring that forward, not just from an audit standpoint. In other words, like, what is the hurdle rate to get into the group? But really, we want to make sure that it's matched well, to the right groups for what they're trying to achieve. And so again, that's some of the reasoning behind what we do. But the absolute answer is that yes, we do that, and we make it visible.
And to add to that, Jen, great question. That we have a lot of different customers, and not all of them are super passionate about sustainability, right? So we adapt our approach to the customer, and some folks want to be 100% sustainable, others 50%, other 10%. Some care about packaging, other care about materials. So we don't force our agenda on our customers, but we try to encourage everybody to move in a more sustainable direction. But ultimately, it's up to our customer, the creator, the entrepreneur, the company. Whatever standard they set, we can help support that.
All right.
And maybe one other just quick item here. This is not just for the manufacturers that are on the line here, but also for our creators that are here too. As an example, I gave the example of recycled plastic. If you talk to plastic injection groups, they will tell you, generally speaking, it is a harder product to use. And there's a fine balance between how much of the recycled material and how much of the virgin material is going into it. I think that for everybody, it's important to also go back to the beginning, which is that creating products is challenging. Doing it really successfully is even more challenging. Having groups that are leaning into these areas is super important. So even if you don't necessarily have a badge, right? There's not some international group that comes out and says that you're a really good recycled manufacturer, plastic injection molding group. Seeing the work that you've done and bringing that forward too and showing clients is another big part of what we really want to be doing. And then also giving guidance to saying like, hey, you may need to have a certain amount of grace with this particular product, where you may see that actually the number of shots that can be done may be lower. But overall, let's go ahead and look at the overall impact of what's happening to make sure that it makes sense throughout.
All right. The next question we have is from Alex. He wanted more information on the channels we mentioned, REB and REI, how channels are promoting sustainable products. I think is a good deep dive.
Yeah, that's a big topic. As we shared, Amazon has a number of different certifications. Mostly they are independent of Amazon, right? You can go get your certification separately. And I think any and all of those certifications are helpful in positioning your brand if you want to go to distributors or retailers like REI. And I think that the criteria that they have are different. Every retailer have their different criteria. So I don't know if there's one answer that do this and you will be accepted into the inner circle. But I think it starts with where do you want to go and looking at their criteria and then building your product accordingly. Neil, I don't know if you want to add something to that.
I think I loved your last statement there, Henrik. I think it's all about where do you want to end up. If you can forecast where you want to be in 6 months' time, a year's time with your company, with your product line, that defines your next step. Because I think if you just start the outset of what should I start, what can I do right now? I think you can fall short of the potential for yourself and your product. So I think just that larger roadmap of where you want to get to will really help it make your choices far more obvious in terms of, okay, well, these are the steps I take towards that.
Yeah, it's like if you have a food product and you want to get into Whole Foods, it's a pretty straightforward exercise to see, okay, what standards do I need to meet to get into Whole Foods? And then, that creates a straight path. But, like Neil said, to try to lay out the whole universe of what are everyone's requirements, it's a little more complex.
And I would just say, like, from just a very simple, straightforward next step, as an example, like if you'd like to see some of what this is, you can go ahead and Google or Baidu, wherever you are in the world, search for REI Product Impact Standards. So again, REI Product Impact Standards. They have different versions, so make sure that you're on the right version on this one. But it's a 17-page document that's been very thoughtfully put together in terms of, for REI, what are the expectations for the brands that will be selling at REI, all the way from the chemicals, the materials that are put into it, as well as from the way that value propositions are made. And so just understanding that, again, 17 pages, a little bit technical, but we'd encourage you to begin looking into it and/or partner with somebody who this is what they do. They understand. If you did this, this would allow you to go into these major brands. So if you've been stuck in one major channel for your sales side, again, thinking about this is not just, reducing logistics costs or other things, but this is actually expanding the number of channels that you can be in and being part of that halo effect. It's a great way. You can read it in a half an hour and begin looking at new opportunities.
All right. So one of the questions that we often get asked is, how brands can afford sustainability initiatives. In your experience, what does that look like? What is the cost for some of the things that we mentioned in the webinar today?
You want to take that one, Benjamin?
Actually, I would pass that to Neil if he's good with it.
Absolutely. I think, again, it really ends up classic, not to dodge, but it really depends. And it really depends on what you're looking to have done or what your product is. But in terms of what your very next steps are, I think that's the beauty of it, is that you have a lot of options. The 5 approaches mean that you could start with as simply having a look at your packaging. Is there a little bit of plastic you could remove? Can you re-engineer your packaging? All the way through to, do you re-engineer your product to use less raw materials or remove paint? Although, to the full nth degree, like, do you completely re-engineer your product so that it has better features for low energy, which drives better functionality? So I think in terms of re-engineering your current product, I think there's quite a bit you can do immediately there. Like, talk to your suppliers about your intentions, ask to review your packaging, drive for some, approach a company like Gemba. We can do that work for you. All the way through to, if you see a segment in the market, I think it's also a lot of really interesting investigative work you could do. Like, here is an interesting sector, which I see no diversification or like use of sustainability in terms of its claims. That's ripe for the picking for you as a product creator. I think you can then, again, engage with companies. Certainly Gemba can do that for you in terms of, okay, well, let's engage with that supply chain. Let's engage with an expert team and say, okay, with, again, my roadmap of, I want to both add functionality, but have a better approach, you can start there. So hard to give you specifics, but I think you could spend as little as a few $1,000s all the way up to hundreds of thousands of dollars. It really depends on the impact you want to make and what the scope of your business looks to do. But there's something for everybody, I would say.
Absolutely. And that's really, you can tell we're passionate about this, and this is really what Gemba was created to bring together the best manufacturers, factories in the world, the best designers and engineers in the world with the best creators. And so if you have an idea, I want to create a yoga mat out of recycled plastics, right? Great idea. Come to us and we will figure out how to make that happen. I couldn't tell you right now how, if it's possible or how to make it happen, but I think it all starts with the inquiry. It starts with the desire. It starts with, where do you want to take your company? And that's what Gemba was created to do, to bring together the best resources in the world to create great new products. And going forward, ideally, products that are great for the planet too. So I think we're out of time, Caroline.
Yep.
Thanks, Benjamin and Neil, for joining. It's been fun as always. And thanks for everybody who listened in.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Happy Earth Day.
Happy Earth Day.
Happy Earth Day.
Everyone kind to the planet.